My name is Eli Harrington, and I spent 8 years loving her more than I loved the sea that surrounded our little Portsmouth life. And her name was Clara O'Connor, because that's the name she traded around like a counterfeit bill, because I never saw her as beautiful as I did in the early days, but I see now the ocean can lie to you like that too calm glass 1 minute all teeth and rage the next. I was 21 when we met, working as a deckhand on a mussel farm across the harbor where the water curls green over rocks and smells like iron and brine. She came down every Friday with her sketchpad to draw the boats, and when she noticed me juggling lobster traps to prove a point, she said, "You look like a pirate," and laughed like I'd just handed her a poem. Clara said I made her feel safe, that I was her anchor, and I thought maybe that was a hippie way of saying she needed me, but she was a painter, and her world was pastels and murals that dripped rainbows onto town walls, so maybe rainbows needed anchors the way sails needed ropes. We lived in a cottage with a cat that turned cold on her, and not me, which should have been a hint. When she asked to borrow my laptop to order stain remover for her art, because she said, "Technology is your thing, not mine," and I left the password cached in the memory like a fool. But what does a password matter when your heart is a vault she already broke into? The first time she gaslit me about what I saw online, I thought it was a cognitive slip, but then she mouthed lines that remembered lines others said to her. Oh yes, no, the man on the dating app doesn't exist. I saw the reflection when Clara said the same thing about jealousy being a cage. She was chained too. The summer he crushed the ceramic cup she loved on their dock, she screamed. Get out, knowing it was her own heavy hand that knocked it off the table, because I was the only one repairing porcelain with epoxy from that point on. I quit my job, stayed ashore to cook her meals, used dolls in the den during her shows, and watch her smile for strangers rearrange, while she slept alone more even when I was there. Her profiles kept shifting the way Portsmouth fogs shift shapes at dawn. My turn came swift as low tide. She texted me about buying more towels at Target, pretended to ignore me when I asked how the errand for a new man was going. I did the thing people do when they've become a ghost in their own life. I stared at saved passwords, unsaved hers. Dejaye Kratkoi MS and password. Primrose, because her favorite flower died in the vase before our first anniversary party. I sat stone-faced as her lies fermented in the spam folder of my chest, and then the calm came like a hangover. Clara was testing me, was training me to crumble into preemptive apologies, and my heart grew into a blade I could never sheathe again. First crack in the frost. A fake profile named Julian, an actor with a walk-on part in medical thrillers. He smoked a pipe with a face that resembled unripe fruit. Clara fell for his cover letter about solitude on mountain trails. Friday night I waited at the coffee house with bated breath in hallway mirror as he fed her stories about his nights assembling elaborate habitats for exotic frogs. She texted him at 10:47 p.m. after they left, "You smell like moss in a crypt," and he replied, "If you dig you'll find my treasures." Her laugh made me lean into brick walls until dawn. Second fake, Noah, told her he loved porcupine quills and collected teeth from Boston Bruins fans. Clara mocked my own beard in history books right before brushing actual expensive chapstick on her lips. But when she caught Noah talking to another woman at the counter, he whirled around and snapped, "Backpacks ruin landscapes," like someone feeding lines through the floorboards. Noah vanished with a brushstroke to her tear ducts. The man she met at the wharf that I created through gaslighting and Google stock photos of bonnethead sharks. Oh, that one. His town car struck her parked Honda hard and left. Clara cried to a bartender. He hated the ocean, said it diluted cities. I carved her dates like driftwood, each misshapen into a weapon. My sister said I looked dead. She mouthed legals into my ears about restraining orders and "You'll become her." But I pieced her next dinner plans with men who always folded napkins crooked or wore socks with sandals as a curse as method. Everyone knew about socks in Portsmouth. Her longest, now his longest fake connection was Simon, a jazz musician who never played gigs with keys, but photos of keys covered his apartment. He canceled 2 hours before brunch, said he'd been catching the slow death of his mother's Bengal cat through her nursing home webcam. Clara sobbed in the bathroom while I mopped the floor where the cat vase shattered, trying to remind her pets are projections. Everyone knows that. But she was too inflamed to hear the lie behind the truth. I had a contact at the record store who let me print Simon's images. His name wasn't real, but his grief was mine. At the breakup that day, I paused at the library steps because she wore my grandmother's ring like guilt. I thought we'd build a raft someday, she said between permissible sobs, and I whispered, check your messages, before telling her I did the cancellations. The password was hers. The faces were mine. The tears that spilled after I left, I'd collected them like bait to fuel the next storm. Months later, an email arrived titled, "For the man I made wash ashore." She wrote that I'd slayed her better than anyone she'd met, called my malevolence maternal. The joke was Mama's, but there were still wet spots on my keyboard when I deleted it 10 ways. Her accounts vanished, then re-emerged like ghost ships, and I smiled when the illusion of romance no longer required velvet shadows. My sister begged me to stop, but I saw Clara chasing the doorstop, now the ghost trying to fit through after I became the one who would flinch first. Every cold dude she met from that point was real, but real turned out to be another repetition of her pattern, hating tall men, candy stripes, seizing purse snaps so odd. Her life became a movie where the phone always rang as the credits rolled. I quit Portsmouth's tides-used trains and met her New York friends, fed them stories about moss-eaten virtues about her. I ruined garden parties with come-ons, watched them drip with distrust. Now she walks through subway stations with affirmations in her ears, but my messages still thread them like interference. The tide here, I've learned to build breakwaters from wreckage. The emails from her still persist, but they bounce now like fishing lures on water I've long since mastered. Clara was the calm that broke her own palm until every echo sang through concert halls, but I'm learning not to listen so well, not to trust, not to anchor anything. Her last profile said, looking for a knight who speaks in shadows. If she expects me to scratch at her door, she's underestimating the rot of vengeance. It drowns cities, and Père Auteur smiles ashore. But I keep watching. I keep carving truths on her rail, even as the current underneath threatens to take them too. Portsmouth's fog doesn't follow me here, but it recurs in dreams, reminding me with every wave curls that men don't sink, they float until something in their chests cracks and hardens and learns to stay buoyant through any storm. Even hers, even 8 years chained to breath. I'm not done writing her profile. I'm not done at all. The sea has taught me how to endure camouflage. Clara doesn't realize, yet the tide's most toxic phase is when it pretends to retreat permanently. The sea doesn't forgive. I learned this when the fog returned. Not in Portsmouth, but here, where I'd finally breathed salt into freshwater lungs, where my sister's voicemail drowned itself in the trash bin. She hadn't spoken to me in months. Not since the night I told her how Clara's new boyfriend, Ben, snapped photos of her sleeping face like security footage, how I mailed those photos to his fiancée in Copenhagen who left him at the altar because the glare of Clara's eyelashes in the frame looked too intentional. He left her bleeding in the street, my sister hissed, so why are you crying? I didn't tell her how my laughter had hollowed into something that rattled like anchor chain. I didn't tell her how I'd carved Ben's ex's address into the dashboard of his Kia, how I watched the taillights tremble toward the ferry, how Clara's screams made me want to wade into the surf and drink the horizon until I choked. The pattern fractured. Clara stopped booking dates through apps after the third vanishing act, not because she'd guessed my blade beneath the petals, but because she grew wise to the lifeless syntax of men she'd already met in her head. She swapped profiles for real hands, ones that didn't come preloaded with regret. Mikey arrived first, a barista who tattooed sea creatures on his arms and asked her about the war wound on her wrist where I'd once gripped too hard, helping her with a mural. I tried to ruin that. Hacked his Instagram to post his grandmother's ultrasound photos, stolen from a Chicago doctor he visited once. But Clara laughed it off, texted "WTF are you doing with your life?" while he made her coffee with a heart poured in foam. Then came Aidan, the economics grad student who quoted Keynes during sex and wore her down until she slept curled around his textbooks like driftwood. I fed his roommate a rumor about bulletproof vests in Aiden's closet after I planted a single hollow point shell in Aiden's sock drawer, but Clara's tearful, "Who put you here?" wasn't about betrayal. It was about her own fingerprints smudged around the drawer the morning before. She didn't suspect me. She suspected herself. "That's worse," whispered a voice I'd buried months before the divorce, the same voice that surfaced when her confession email washed ashore in my spam folder like debris. The worst came on a Tuesday. Clara met Louis, a digital nomad who squatted near the Museum of Modern Art feeding pigeons with kale crisps and reciting Hamlet to tourists. He adored her for 3 weeks before following her to Portsmouth during a blizzard. She deposted a mural there, neon corals blooming across the fishery's rusted silos, and Louis kissed her at the base of it while waves slung themselves against the rocks like spiteful orphans. I couldn't bear it. I couldn't bear the way she wore jealousy now, the way she chose honesty like sunscreen on a doomed skin. So I broke. I did the work of 10 storms. His laptop sat open in a cafe. I didn't even need to meddle. Louis' own Google Calendar spilled itself into my palms. Therapy appointments, a half-written email to Clara about adopting a rescue dog, a highlighted March 14th noting DNA results for mother. I downloaded everything, crafted a site mimicking MIT's research hub, and uploaded a fake letterhead declaring Louis' father, a man he'd reviled in Instagram captions, had recently been arrested for animal cruelty in Maine. I tracked his Airbnb IP, filled his inbox with viral panic threads about stalkers named Clara O'Connor who left venomous headlines in guest books. Louis left in 17 hours flat, didn't yell, just texted her. "The pigeons taste like sorrow here. I'm going south." Clara screamed into her apartment walls like a gull missing its mate, and when I watched her spill alcohol into her mural paints, obliterating the silo aquamarine, I felt the floor tilt, not triumph, something jagged. I tasted metal, not constellations or victory, but guilt's heartbeat, the kind that flips light switches. For the first time, my sister showed up uninvited. She kicked my door like it owed her rent money, stormed into the panic room I kept behind closed blinds, my war room. My screensaver still cycled fake Clara profiles I'd crafted for catharsis, and she stared at them like I'd exposed something holy. "Stop," she said. "Just stop being them." My eyes stayed dry, but my throat bubbled with scum. Weeks later, I'd find that my own hands had grown unfamiliar around knives, how the dull edge of my own humanity had filed itself against every email I'd forged. News of Louis' sister reached me sideways. She called him 1,000 miles from whatever jungle he'd fled to, told him her eggs didn't stick to Clara's plate. "He's got someone else lying about now." The woman on the phone didn't know I'd made her speak. My sister's fury had been the catalyst. She'd told Clara's therapist on ethics roundtables, "Let details slip about the man who weaponized kindness." Clara commissioned a mural in Queens, except the figures now bled black and screamed in latticework. The police visited my old mackerel hut, smiled when I offered tea, left pamphlets about stalking-related cybercrime, so I crawled into hunger. Sleep turned monsters. Their fangs wore Clara's hospital mask, the one she donned the day her mother slit her wrists in the bathtub. I hadn't known, not until I found the worn doe-eyed Fode tucked in a weathered copy of Wuthering Heights in her Brooklyn attic 2 years after we'd moved. That memory looped now, Clara screaming, "Heather!" Instead of calling my mother's name, my mother who was Heather, who wasn't real in her grief except as fuel. I scanned her new murals, found links buried in her brushstrokes, hospitals, psychiatrists, institutions that now guarded her like citadels. My war room walls meeked out with each press mention of manipulation trauma. The tide had corrected. Clara wasn't ashes, she was flint. I didn't think so until the voicemail, not from her, from Mikey, tattooing octopuses on her arms again. He had sensed something, he said, and ran Clara's photos through a facial recognition app. Loops in his code made some images vibrate. He realized her face shifted subtly, jawlines, beauty marks, a glitch, a clone, or a man who needed to learn that even destroyers go blind. He never heard her last message. I did. "Eli, I swear on Mama's grave I didn't mean for the cat vase to crash. You remember the cat vase, right?" Clara wept, voice gnawing at air. "I think her ashes are still in the dregs of my lungs. Be careful. I see him now. He's wearing your boots." I spiraled. For 7 days, I buried myself in figs and cement dust. Her real voice, cracked raw, not filtered through screenshots or vendettas, burned the scorn off my vertebrae. Turns out guilt isn't a dagger, it's a wet rope you hold until your wrists blister and rot. I started wading northward by train. Portsmouth called, not through tides but letters. I reread the folder marked drafts, Clara unopened. Emails I'd never sent, warnings about a man named James who lived in my former cottage, confessions I'd disabled on my app. Even drafts titled, I Could Have Loved You, that Clara's words wrote once on rainy hours. In Act Three's harshest breath, I met Simon again. Not the fake Simon, but the janitor from the jazz club lunging in her memory like a phantom. He told me Clara's mother died on a Friday, and she'd streaked red from her fingertips for 3 weeks straight, not paint, not gin, but blood. Simon had seen it, like she was trying to stitch a wake. His report sank me, then flooded me. Clara's bios always lied about favorite cheeses, hometowns, colors, not her trauma. I realized how I'd viewed her pain as another platform, not a human. How vengeance mirrors birth, the way both stretch skin until coherence shatters. By Act 4, I'd tracked her down. Living in Glens Falls now, 9 hours from the tang that birthed me. Strange place for driftwood. But it wasn't just Nova Scotians that wandered north. Sometimes we flee to where oceans can't follow. Her Instagram deactivated, but I circumvented, showed a mural about minutiae, chipped utensils in drawers, her real mother's palms sketched in ochre across the canvas. This is the first thing I've ever bought myself, she captioned a cracked window from her studio. I recognized the crack's shape. It mimicked our oldest gull. I knocked her profile offline that day, bypassing 20 firewalls. Louis called her a ghost. Mikey cut contact with barista friends. Aiden clogged his LinkedIn feed with quail egg ads just to make her smile. Clara was becoming invisible. But I was becoming visible again, clothing drains on me. I started writing, not deception. Poetry once, terrible things about torn sails and a woman with ocean wind tangled in her teeth. Then the letter, real paper. Smelled like kerosene and aged rain. Clara's mother's last opus, 16 pages dense as peat, confessing how she'd skipped pills for years to God had the pain, how James once mocked Clara for never tasting lobster meat raw, how Clara's mirror bends toward her mother's spiral, not lies. She doesn't know yet the cul-de-sac where her veins inherited my breaks. I read it in a library basement, teeth chattering. All the surgeries Clara had endured, all the battled dates and heartbreaks, none fabricated by me except where stem had twisted branch. I'd razored away the lies holding up her pain only to puncture the wounds deeper into open air. I kept the letter, didn't post it, didn't tweet it like some victims do. I write this from the moment after when Clara called the house. Not mine, her old cottage 4 doors from the muscle rig. A reporter baited her, "Hear this voice," and she said yes. Seemed calm. Said in a Tapestry documentary, "I've been fencing with shadows. Thank you for showing him his face." The reporter asked me if I'd generated lies. I hung up. I didn't need to affirm what might have already imploded. I booked a taxi to Glens Falls. No blade this time, no passwords, tattoos, or photos. I brought a single brick I'd admired on her last mural, charcoal gray, a piece of Louis' tractor wheel she'd painted, a shard of something besides destruction to patch this dune with. When the car picked me up, I asked for a pen, drew a compass on my own forearm. Not anchors, not vendettas, not even Clara's name, just 4 arrows bleeding into one, and beneath it, now shift. The rest waits in Act 5. What comes after waiting? Nothing anyone can predict from the shoreline, but movement, always movement. I didn't knock. Clara would have seen me coming like a fog bank. The taxi dropped me near the river, icy, shitting out the kind of mist that makes mainland lungs seize. Her cottage sagged in the distance, windows bordered with leftover mural panels. I carried the brick, its edges raw against my gloveless hands, my compass tattoo, diagram of arrows bleeding into one, already defined new north. Clara met me at the threshold, no paint on her apron. Her eyes were tectonic plates shifting over a deeper magma. She'd expected this. Never mentioned the voicemail or the reporter's ambush. Just led me inside, steam from a tea kettle harmonizing with the pleats of her silence. A single chair sat center room, ropes of bindweed curling through its spindles like residue of my own infestation. "Read in peace," she said, sliding a folder across the table. It held the letter from Clara's mother. Handwritten. Smelled like the kerosene I'd stored in my childhood garage. The pages uncurled my gut. Her mother wrote of abandoning therapy sessions when husbands didn't understand migraines, of stitching Clara's first dress from an old tablecloth, then hemming it with shards of broken mirror, of James' voice brooking no weakness, demanding she marinate lobster meat in lime juice until Clara punctured her own plate. He couldn't see how her bones already bent, wrote the mother, how she earned fractures alone. Clara had lived this as gospel. I'd carved fables out of scars I never earned. The worst line, Eli's the one who cracks glass both of us spill. You stole this, Clara asked, her voice frayed but held. Simon's rendering of the blood weeks, the ghosted emails, none of it mattered now. She already knew I defaked the MIT letter. She already traced Mikey's panic to my IP. What crushed me was the pamphlet on her counter, New Hope Clinic. A sibling script circled my name in the margin. My sister had been here, spoken healing into this room. Clara had become an oracle immune to bait. The brick trembled in my holster. I'd planned to blame it on the cold. Now it felt taunting, absurd. She didn't call the cops, didn't scream. She took the brick from me and stood on a ladder, inserting it into the mural under construction, a patched fissure where the mother's palms had been plowed under. My brother wouldn't understand, she whispered. War chokes the paddock. Then louder, directed at the dead space above the doorframe. Except here it doesn't. Here it's just recycled. I fled, tried rewiring Richard's old tactics on a final keyboard, posted Clara's childhood orthopedic records across 5 continents, anemic retorts, tangents about hairy mother's arthritis, no clicks. Sims marked my emails as spam, their algorithms hostile. All these years spent stitching ghosts into garrote, and she'd preempted it. She moved, painted, perpetrated her own truth. The web closed itself around my ankles. A week later, the reporter returned. Her documentary's climax elided Lewis, migrant passed with Clara's latest work, resting on a sediment-laden pier near Baptist Landing. The mural was wild, blood-soaked, but calm. 2 women danced in oil slick, one with my sister's curls, one with Clara's wrists bent in surrender. Camera lingered on the brick integrated into the structure. Its rough SIDE Chinese letter, I corrected the lens. This wasn't about her, I hissed into the mic's teeth. It was about how we foil one another unpacking ghosts. The reporter thanked me for the damage. Clara's therapist, she said, would frame this debacle as mirrored turbulence. Clara requested no closing interviews, left a notebook in the pier's crevice, open to a poem titled Boots. Mine centered the narrative. The cat vase's memory, reconstructed, shards used as pigment filler, asylum dust, now shift. I'm at the edge of a beach I didn't remember buying. A pond somewhere, ripples architecting headlights into gold. Clara's last exhibit is in Montreal now, a tetralogy depicted through coffins refinished into bassinet shapes. My sister visits annually with bouquets of forsaken at symbols. Clara didn't take them. Mural number 5 still hosts the brick. It's labeled Truth. The compass on my arm grows legible only at midnight. 4 arrows pointing inward. I dream of Clara's mother, her wrist cut a bandage over my sister's own grip when the ferry capsized at 6 years old. I see that blur again, except this time Clara's mother kneels beside James, her sobs splaying the violence into confession. I don't type anymore. I paint. A response across the abandoned fishery silos, uneven, haunted. Among the fractures is a woman with octopus tattoos and boot prints that could be mine, or Clara's, or Louis. No, not Louis. His sister moved to Martha's Vineyard. Richard proposed a show, refused. Painting's not about audiences now. It's about repatriating toxins, about craving wreckage until you realize the hull rusts faster than the skin. I visited the clinic. My files shriveled into a monograph titled Relay Trauma. Clara exhibited today. Her cue resembled the waves I'd once fed her dates. Her last mural, SCRAMBLE tie letter E40, tie letter E1B, tie letter E25, tie letter E35, tie letter E22. Clara's mother's hands zigzagged through the frame, holding not blood but the bedtime habits eaten from mackerel seed smoothie blends. Among the brushstrokes, a clumsily rendered man in boots, not blurred, not weaponized, just shivering. The bricks in this piece, repurposed from a mauve cat vase. Simon told me Clara now exhibits steadily during gull migration, protects the incubators. I'm threading bootlaces through clay now, not personal, just all tethers deserve rebirth. Machine gun report. Clara's therapist shared another commentary. They want me to write an op-ed to explain the cycle. I digressed, instead writing about how Clara once threw gin bottles at the sink and I'd watched every glitch of foam polish his biography. I know her better now. Not the Clara rubbished by my falsities, but the one who broke away by stitching a I letter 1EB9NS and Mikey's together as survival architecture. Her mother's grave I still avoid, except in heat domes when the paint burns hallucinogenic. Then I visit both of them. Clara's there sometimes. Her MFA students ask about my class. Mayday, did you burn one of his lettuces last year? No, yesterday. The sea here doesn't forgive, but sometimes depicts. I let Louis' therapy notes recycle into fertilizer. Mikey opened a new studio, squid tentacled walls facing east. Aiden contacted me once. His book about quail egg markets ends with a foreword co-authored by a woman named Clara Hawthorne. She thanked their mutual referrals for blunting the family's vertebrae. The taxi driver still texts bi-weekly, asks if I want to shift muse. Clara's biography quadruples in libraries. Mine shrivel into a Yelp post under abandoned jazz clubs. The brick I left with her, used now as a doorstop, but when the snow unloads itself, she lifts it to check the grass pulse. Said so in a secret blog, only 3 subscribers. One summer she'll repaint the pond edge. My boots donated host marigold roots in Calgary. The sea can't be duplicated, only conceded. Today I built a raft out of forgiven CPUs and needed grief, pointed inland. Granted, Clara resents no one. Her last therapy mention, the boy in boots listens, but hasn't landed. I'm still writing. Only these days, no liars, no target, just the audit of enjambment. Clara's mural in Montreal contains a corner, a jagged, unsanded square where only the word wait bleeds through dozens of refinished layers. I leave figs on her doorstep now, sweet, pulping mud. Simon swears Clara paints my absence into new pieces. Her brother would have hated that, but he'd hated lobster meat raw. I plant kelp where my windows used to flood. The Mackerel Hut held an exhibit 3 weeks ago. Mikey's tattoo studio funded the opening, Clara present but not smiling. She stared at the rafters where THE Chinese letter of my former temporaries lingered, said in curation, every ghost requires confessional architecture, even self-woven ones. The clinic's pamphlet got published, Relay Trauma Spectrum. Subtype, Brick-Dependent Epiphany. I recognized the author's name. The sister who left me a draft about warped empathy. I wrote back she shouldn't include my certifications, said Clara already eclipsed them, said sisters deserve lexicons outside devastation. She responded, but the brick's what healed us. I'm painting now in blues I can't describe. Simon delivered a crate of Clara's old brushes last winter. The tip still wore ink from her first failed activism. I used them only once, on Louis's sister's new writing program. Wrote my apologies in skyleaf pulp, not to Clara, to the woman who cried thank you when I slipped her kelp in the clinic lobby, her voice trembling like the fairy's tale, like Clara's once did, like mine never did until the crack spread beneath the compass. The pond remembers, not betrayal, not enshrined, but release. Clara's boots still print north, mine are nestled against flaked fermentation. Shift occurs in terminal speed, not fractal. Final ident, the S, E, a B, or RU Chinese letter S. And the pond observes, empty, not quite hollow, as collapsible as lungs, as communal as grief.